Maybe. Good morning and welcome back to another episode of CFL Summer Showcase Northern Lights. I am joined by my always trusty co-host Michael Washington, and we are here to discuss the Canadian Football League. If you haven't checked out this episode or one of them to this point, we do these every Sunday. Sometimes the start time varies a little bit, sometimes within 45 minutes. So we're starting a little bit late today, but that's all right. Plenty to talk about today. We're going to hit the intro and then we'll jump right into it. All right, it's another great Sunday morning to talk some CFL action. We had some very interesting games this past week, and they all wrapped up in time for us to have this episode for once. So we've got, not a ton of news this week. I mean, I don't want to say it's been quite as crazy as weeks past, but we got plenty to talk about today. Might be a little bit of a shorter episode just because, like I said, there's not a ton to talk about. Not a bunch of injury information, thankfully. We're always happy to see these guys staying healthy and able to be on the field. And then we got some guys that should hopefully be returning here soon from injury. We'll talk about PJ Walker's first start. Hamilton's quietly doing really well this season, and Michael thought that was a very pertinent topic to talk about, so we'll go ahead and discuss that as well. Trey Laval kind of carried Winnipeg to a win this weekend. Edmonton, are they on the right track? Do they need to blow it up? Where are we feeling at that point? And then Montreal completely blown out by Saskatchewan. So just some of the subjects we'll just cover here today. But where do you want to start, Michael?
Well, let's start with the hottest team in the CFL real quick. Let's start with Hamilton. I mean, let's talk about Hamilton for a second here, okay? Look, this team was 0-2 after the first 2 weeks, and they lost to Calgary, and they opened up with a loss to Calgary, and then they lost in week 2 to Saskatchewan. So two of the better teams in the league. As it sits right now, Hamilton now currently holds a 6-2 record. They're on a 6-game win streak, and they have a better record than Calgary, one of the teams that they lost to. The only team that they don't have a better record than is Saskatchewan. Bo Levi Mitchell's playing pretty good for a squad that I think in the preseason rankings, Sam, you and I both had ranked, 8th in our power rankings? This team nobody's talking about. And I know that their schedule after the first 2 weeks hasn't been, insanely difficult per se, but they do hold wins over Montreal, who actually they handled pretty handedly at 35 to 17. They dropped 51 on Toronto. I know Toronto's not having the best of seasons. They beat your Ottawa team, and then they beat Ottawa back-to-back weeks, I should say, and then they beat BC recently. They go out, they come back from behind to beat Edmonton with Cody Fajardo, and now they have BC again in week 10 heading into their second bye week in week 11. This team could be 7-2 heading into that bye week, and a potential playoff contender that nobody saw it coming. What do you think was Hamilton's biggest turning point so far this season, in your opinion?
If we really sit back and kind of look back at last season, Bo Levi Mitchell had a great year.
He
So
did.
I think this lies a lot on the defense. They were kind of the area that was lacking last season. They simply were outscored in a lot of games that they shouldn't have been. It wasn't that the offense wasn't putting up points or they weren't moving the ball. There was obviously some key mistakes here and there, which there seems to always be when Bo Levi is involved. Not saying that he's a terrible quarterback by any stretch, but he does throw his fair share of interceptions. But I think the main point of Hamilton's turnaround has been situational football, and then also, like I said, the defense. They're just doing a lot better with play calling, specifically in key situations. They're putting points on the board when it matters the most, and they're really kind of avoiding crucial mistakes that would otherwise have sunk them, that like they did last season. So, um, I mean, honestly, when you originally said Hamilton was 6-2, it like took a moment for me to kind of rewind the season and be like, yeah, okay, I guess they are actually like 6-2. Like, how did they quietly just roll to this record after, like you said, starting off 0-2? So I mean, it's one of those situations where we really got to kind of throw some kudos or some respect to the coaching staff there, because honestly, Hamilton's had a lot of tough seasons as of late. So they easily could have just packed it in and been like, you know what, another losing season. It is what it is, and just kind of dealt with it. But whatever they did seems to have resonated with the team, and here they are turning things around and getting stringing together some wins here. So I mean, as far as when you look forward for this team, you said they could be, as much as, 7-2, 7-3 here shortly. But where do you see them landing by playoff time? I mean, are they going to be a significant uh, uh, contender come playoff time, or are we talking about a team that's hitting a hot streak right now, but maybe not, on the levels of a Montreal or Winnipeg or Saskatchewan right now?
So right now, as it stands, they have BC this week, which I think they can move to 7-2 with. They've already beaten BC. BC has some issues going on, but then they play Saskatchewan leading into their Week 12 bye week. So that's going to be the real testament for them again. They lost to Saskatchewan earlier in the season, Week 2. You know, but they only lost 28-23. So they were in that game. So it wasn't like it was like a blowout of any sort. So they've already proven that they can hang with the best team in the league at this point. But that's going to be a key playoff spot for or a key positional spot possibly in the playoffs for Hamilton as we move forward. As it sits right now, Hamilton's one of the only teams that doesn't have a ton of issues. Like they have a few things that they probably could improve upon, like almost any team does. But overall, they're playing really well on offense. They're playing really good on defense. They're making plays this year in close games that they weren't making last year. Last year, that game against Edmonton, they would have ended up blowing up somehow and ended up losing by even more than what they did. Then you got the Labor Day weekend where they play Toronto, who seemingly can't get it on track. And I'm assuming that that's going to be the possible Chad Kelly return. Who the hell knows? Um, at this point with him, what's going on with him? And then they got Montreal again. So Winnipeg, and then they close out, with Edmonton, and when they play Winnipeg one more time. So they don't really have. I don't know if they face Calgary again. I'm assuming maybe at the end of the year they do, but very realistically speaking, if we circle back to the preseason, Bo Levi Mitchell said on TSN, and I think it was to Three Down Nation also, that he felt like they had a team this year that could win the Grey Cup. Now, I know that seems a little premature considering the fact that, and it sounds like a leadership talk, like we call it coach speak or whatever, but looking at this team on a 6-game win streak, possible 7, and even, let's be realistic, even though they play Saskatchewan heading into their bye week, they could be 8-2 at the end of that stretch and on an 8-game win streak going into this bye week and really solidify themselves as one of the best teams in this league. Um, they've been lucky to not have any major injury issues. So, knock on wood for them that doesn't happen. And as long as they can stay healthy, I think this Hamilton team could actually maybe be a disruptor when it comes playoff time. I don't know if they're necessarily Grey Cup contenders per se, but you never know. Sometimes all you have to do is just make the playoffs. I mean, look at Washington last year in the NFL getting to the NFC Championship game. So sometimes all you have to do is just make the playoffs. So yeah, to be honest with you, I'm looking at them right now, and they could end easily with the second best record in the league, if not, at least a top 3 record in the league when it comes playoff time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, after you just laid it out the way you did, it definitely seems like they have a. I don't want to say an easy schedule, but it definitely seems like they have a team friendly schedule. We'll just put it that way. There are some games in there that are very winnable. So it definitely could be an interesting situation for them going forward, which I mean, really only kind of serves to complicate the playoff window even more than it was, prior to them kind of getting back on the roll here because when you look at across the league, really the only two teams that are completely out of it at this point, or I guess they're not even completely out of it, but they're falling behind the pack at this point is Ottawa and Edmonton. And past that, like it seems like every other team seems to be finding some sort of success. So it's going to be a really interesting playoff race as we come down here, and
You missed
and
Edmonton there too. Edmonton's kind of fallen behind behind it too.
no, I'm sorry. Did I not say Edmonton?
You said Toronto and Montreal. I mean, the Toronto and Ottawa.
That is my mistake. I meant to say Edmonton and Ottawa. Toronto, I have a little bit more faith in obviously because of the Chad Kelly situation. When he comes back, I do anticipate that they're going to see a little bit of a turnaround. And they are keeping pace with Ottawa. They're 2-6 as well. Ottawa just won their second game. Edmonton's 1-6. So I mean, there is some situation there where you could see Toronto kind of catch some steam here and all of a sudden be right in the thick of things. BC might be 3-5, but they're definitely not out of it either. So I mean, it should be a very interesting playoff run, especially if Ottawa can string together some wins here as well. All of a sudden that just further muddies the waters.
Yeah, and one of the teams that we're going to be talking about here near the top two is Calgary, and if you don't have anything else you want to touch on Hamilton, we can move into Calgary real quick, as you talked about PJ Walker and his debut in the CFL, and it did not go good at all. It was actually quite dreadful. Ottawa seems to be kind of Calgary's kryptonite so far early in the season. Two of the 3 losses that Calgary have come at the hands of Ottawa. One was in a Soup Bowl, and then the second one was against a backup quarterback. So obviously you can always make a case one way or the other. But at the end of the day, it's still a loss, and it goes against a record. And this one was kind of a dominant fashion, win for Ottawa. Calgary, though, definitely should have some concern with PJ Walker as their backup, especially with Vernon Adams' history of injuries and whatnot. I don't know what your thoughts are, but it was a pretty dreadful debut, I think, for PJ Walker, and I'm sure that nobody's probably harder on himself than himself is right now, but you kind of have to wonder now about Calgary's backup quarterback plan.
I'm actually on the flip side of things. Yes, it was not a beautiful debut. Obviously, he threw 3 interceptions. I do want to point out that one of those interceptions, he was trying to fit the ball in a window. There was a defender underneath the receiver. He had to put it up high to allow the receiver an opportunity to get it over the defensive back's head. But then what happened is he just really kind of floated it a little bit, and I think really like it realistically was maybe a foot difference. If that ball had been a foot lower, it probably would have been a completion in between 2 defenders, and we're talking about how beautiful of a ball that was. But it just kind of sailed on him a little bit, went right over the receiver's hands as he extended, and fell right into the defensive back's hands on his 3rd interception. So, obviously never a good thing when you have multiple interception game, but for his first CFL start, I think he did some things that were good. And I also think that part of the reason that he had such a struggle finding success in this game is he had little to no support in the run game. You look at those numbers, and Calgary, to their credit, stuck with the run game despite the fact that they really weren't producing. I mean, but you look across the board, and you've got Dedrick Mills averaged 1.6 yards per carry. Ludovic Choquette, 2.5 yards per carry. Dalen Baldwin, 2 yards per carry. Jason Antwi, 0 yards per carry on 4 carries. So it's just a situation where neither team really got the run game going. Ottawa had a little bit more success than Calgary did, but I was also kind of surprised that we didn't see more of Quincy Vaughns. I mean, like obviously there was only a couple situations where he really could have been utilized, but he kind of stayed on the bench, and I was kind of a little bit surprised by that, given the fact that you are running out a backup quarterback, regardless of the fact that it's PJ Walker and he started games in the XFL and the NFL. I think you could have benefited from adding a little bit more um, just question marks to the offense, right? Give the defense something to think about a little bit.
Yeah, I think that PJ Walker did some really good things. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from him from that front. I think that he definitely had some flashes of what made him successful down here. My only reason why I'm saying that if I'm Calgary and I'm kind of questioning is because he was with Calgary last year at the end of the year. He was there all off season. He's been there, with that offense for probably longer than most new, quarterbacks making their debut are with a team. So um, it just makes me wonder if it's, and this goes back to the conversation we had in, I think it was a preseason episode, where we talked about coming from 11-man ball to 12-man ball and the different style and how much of it possibly played with PJ in this instance. I mean, he's a veteran. He's been around the league for years, or several leagues for years, played for numerous teams, but it very possibly could have just been one of those situations where he was not realizing how much of a different style it is in this situation. Now, he made some beautiful passes. That third interception you were talking about was a beautiful pass. I mean, even though it was picked off, you're absolutely correct. It was a beautiful pass, and you're talking a game of inches. It reminds me of the Any Given Sunday quote. This is a game of inches. Thank you, Al Pacino. But in this case, it's not something that I feel like if I'm Calgary, that with Vernon Adams' history, like unless we can find a way to get PJ caught up to speed, that I would feel comfortable with him. I'm not going to move on from him after one game, obviously. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But you have to start kind of keeping an eye on it. And you just kind of have to start making sure that you have a plan in place in case something doesn't work out in this case. Because I love PJ Walker. I wish nothing but the success for him. You know how excited I was when we signed him. And I'm still excited he's with the team because he does bring a veteran presence and he has had success, in other leagues. It's just, if I'm Calgary, I think I need to kind of keep a close eye on this situation just because you can't afford it in this league, especially where you're talking about the playoff spots 3 through 6 are, usually up for grabs every year. So
That's fair. That's fair. And to your credit, I mean, there is a little bit of concerning background here when you look at interceptions and PJ Walker. You look at his NFL run, and his 2020 season with Carolina, he threw 1 touchdown and 5 interceptions. 2021, 1 interception, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. His time with Cleveland in 2023, one touchdown, 5 interceptions. So yes, he had a great run in Houston with the Roughnecks, and that is something that's kind of, for lack of a better term, carried him to the point that he's at right now. Teams really kind of trust him due to the fact that he did have that starting experience and then all the time that he had in Carolina and then Cleveland as well. But yeah, you kind of overall have to start to question things, right? I mean, you look at it, and if you take out that XFL run where he had 15 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions, his numbers do not look great. He's got 7 touchdowns to 19 interceptions. So
does that
that's
include this one where he doesn't have a touch? He didn't throw a touchdown, did he?
he threw 1.
He threw 1, so 1 to 3 added to this one. So I mean,
exactly.
That seems to be the trend in this case. So it's just I like PJ. I really hope for the best for him, but you really have to wonder about that backup position at this time. So
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I don't think that you would necessarily feel like you're not going to go into a game and assume that you're going to win anything with PJ Walker starting right now. And I think that is a problem. Obviously, you want to feel confident in your backup, but I think Calgary likes a lot of the things that PJ brings to the table, his mobility, and the fact that realistically his game is very similar to Vernon Adams, so they don't have to swap up the offense or the play calling Dramatically, right? You can essentially keep the game plan that you would keep with Vernon Adams in there. You might tweak it a little bit because, they're different passers, but overall, you can run some of the quarterback run game. You get them out on the edge, move the pocket, stuff like that. And I think with that, it makes a lot of sense to have PJ Walker there. And I do ultimately think that he'll get some more playing time. I talked about it on Twitter just the other day. Vernon Adams has never started more than 16 games in a season. So there's a very good chance that he's going to miss at least one more game, and we're going to see PJ Walker at some point once again. So I think this was a calculated decision by Calgary, partially because they didn't know what to think about PJ. So it's a game early on. They've got a little bit of ground they can afford to lose. We know that Vernon Adams technically passed the concussion protocol before this game, so he could have played, but Calgary was being very safe with it. You
Yep,
don't want to get him
sure.
injured long term. So you throw a PJ Walker out there in a game that you can afford to lose. You give him some starting opportunities, and you get him, hopefully get his feet wet, get him to the point where he's like, okay, I've got some things I need to correct on or work on. I can correct these over the next few weeks until I get my next start. And then hopefully the next time he steps on the field for Calgary, he looks a lot better and he's a lot more comfortable. And I think that's exactly what's going to end up happening. I would imagine his next start is hopefully a lot further down the road. And, hopefully Vernon Adams stays healthy and he proves that we don't need PJ Walker at all in Calgary. But, just based on historical data, he's probably going to miss some more games and we will see PJ again. And I really think that the next time we see PJ Walker, it's going to be a significant difference. I don't want to say dramatic because I don't think that statistically he's going to take a massive jump, but I do think that he's going to make a lot better decisions, be a lot more aware of where that 12th guy is, like they talk so much about on the broadcast. So I think he's got a bright future, and I actually think Calgary made a bright decision because if you can get this guy some playing time and he flashes, all of a sudden you have some trade bait, if nothing else. You can do a very similar thing to what BC did, last season when they brought in Nathan Rourke midseason after the Vernon Adams injury. And then you can, potentially trade PJ Walker this offseason, get some return or capital in return, and then move forward with hopefully Vernon Adams and maybe another quarterback, or that's a long way down the line, but that is something that I think it was in the thought process for Calgary long term.
I mean, I think that they definitely made the right decision by being, cautious with Vernon Adams, because like you said earlier, like we both have really been saying, is with Vernon Adams injury history, there's concern there. Like he's not, I don't want to say he's fragile, but the guy plays like a warrior and he ends up getting injured like a warrior. And then when that happens, you're talking about backup quarterbacks, sometimes third stringers in this league. Like I how many different starting quarterbacks have we already seen? So I know that Calgary made the right decision when it came to Vernon Adams to make sure that he was on the fully 100% when he comes back. But it for me, it's just more from the PJ Walker side of things. It's more just from the idea that I think because we're spoiled with what we saw with the XFL, I think that it's like that's part of the thing that's lingering in the back of our head, and it feels like we know what PJ Walker's capable of. It's just, is it going to translate to the CFL is my concern. And if I'm the coaching staff up there, I would have to try to possibly figure out what worked in Houston when he was with the Roughnecks, and try to see if there's a way that you can integrate that a little bit into the offense without completely changing your offense. I think that might be the best way to be able to try to get success from him. Kind of make the game smaller for him. Don't ask him to do that 12-man, style football, but try to maybe make the game smaller for him so he can focus a little bit more comfortably inside an 11-man game and see if that works. I mean, I don't know how you'd be able to try to shrink the field for a quarterback in the CFL, but I'm sure there's coaches out there that can find ways to make that happen.
I would agree. Maybe just focus on short to intermediate routes and kind of use those to eliminate the deep safety. There's a couple different ways you can approach that. One of the things I want to throw out there as well is, if you look at some of these games that Calgary has played so far this season, you have to wonder why they didn't kind of like insert PJ late in games. I mean, they beat Winnipeg by 21 points.
Yep.
They beat Calgary by 14 points, or Saskatchewan by 14 points. Um, they also beat some teams earlier on in the season by big margins. Winnipeg again, they beat by 21 points. So it's one of those situations where I think they probably should have been inserting PJ in the fourth quarter in some of these games and getting him some more opportunities. When you have a 3-score lead going into the fourth quarter, you should be giving him some snaps, get him more relegated to the game. That way, when he is entering the game in a crucial moment, he's prepared. But um, hindsight's always 2020, obviously. So,
Mhm.
maybe it's a situation where they start doing that going forward, because then you also run less risk of hurting Vernon Adams in what amounts to garbage time as well. So, there's always that benefit on the flip side of things. So, I think they need to kind of address how they've been using PJ so far, but at the same time, like Calgary's on a roll. So I don't necessarily know that I'm I don't know that my predictions for them or my breakdown of what they'd be able to do changes dramatically if PJ's in the game. I think they've got enough around him to find success more weeks than not. But really, they got to get that run game going as well, which I don't think is going to be an issue against some of these other opponents they've got coming down the pike. But we shall see. That is definitely one thing that they did not struggle with prior to this game. I think Diedrich Milks came in with the most rushing yards per game of any running back until he played Ottawa. So, I'm sure they'll get back on the track in that, and then that should hopefully help PJ as quite a bit as well.
Before we move on to Winnipeg, I want to ask you real quick though, since you're the Ottawa fan, how much of this? How much did you catch all of this game?
I did, yes.
Okay. Did it look like to you that Ottawa just wasn't respecting PJ Walker and they were loading up against the run, knowing that that was Calgary's bread and butter? Because when I watched this game, I felt like Ottawa played a little bit more of an aggressive run defense in this game than they've have all season long, and almost like trying to bait PJ Walker into beating them, and maybe just didn't respect that he could. And I don't know if that's just because it was his debut start, but that's almost how it felt like, because like you said, Calgary couldn't get the run game going, and I honestly thought it was because of the aggressive nature of the run defense that Ottawa was putting out there.
I completely agree. I think that was a big factor in what they did, and actually, some of what they did, personnel wise, was also kind of to aid the run game as well. So I mean, we had Lucas Cormier out there quite a bit until he got hurt, and he's more of a linebacker than a defensive back. I mean, he's built a little bit like a defensive back. I want to say he's like 6'2", 195, but
Mm.
he primarily has played some linebacker, and he had seen some snaps back there at halfback as well, which is not really his normal position. So between that and then having guys like Ardarius Pickett and Bennett Williams back there in the secondary, I think that kind of helped us quite a bit when it comes to the run game. And I think that's something that realistically we'll probably see a lot more of going forward, because that has been an Achilles heel for Ottawa so far this season. We were allowing offenses to stay balanced and not forcing them to get one dimensional, and kind of being able to predict what they do on offense. And you see what happens when you can do that. Force a quarterback into making some mistakes because he's not in an advantageous situation on second down. He's typically in second long situations. So I think we had a lot of success with it this game, but at the same time, I don't know that you're necessarily going to sell out to stop the run like that in every game, especially when you've got veteran quarterback play on the other side. But I do think that had a huge impact on how this game went, though.
Yeah, I think so too. I just was curious if I was the only one that had that feeling, or you know, uh, kind of witnessed that, because that's how I felt coming out of the game.
No, you hit the nail on the head as far as that goes. We definitely changed up our philosophy quite a bit on defense, and it seems to have it worked pretty well. So kudos to our defensive coordinator, Will Fields. That was great, great game. Honestly, probably his best so far this season in terms of play calling.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that overall, I think it was really nice to see Ottawa kind of have a legitimate game plan finally come together for them because I know it's been rough this season. So
Definitely has, and it's been interesting to kind of follow along with because last season one of the things that Ottawa seemed to do well overall was kind of avoid shooting themselves in the foot, and that just has not been the case so far this season. Let's take a quick commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss uh, the Winnipeg and Toronto game and how that went. Because honestly, that was probably the game of the weekend so far. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school. This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I use to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
All right, we are back just in time because I was going to hit another commercial and it just ended, and Michael was sitting down. So there we go.
yeah, good timing on that, huh? Good
No
timing.
doubt, no doubt. So yeah, this Winnipeg and Toronto game. I mean, man, going into the halftime, I thought Winnipeg was going to blow them out, and then all of a sudden, the second half came, and Toronto came roaring back. I mean, did you get a chance to watch this whole game?
Yeah, actually, I was watching it, and Justin Kellum and I were messaging back and forth a little bit through this game. And at halftime, we were both talking, about how Winnipeg was going to come out in the second half and pretty much put the nail in the coffin. And then Toronto was just kind of like, little not so fast, action
Yep.
like in college football. So little Lee Corso. So yeah, I mean, hey man, I mean Winnipeg. I think honestly, if you want my honest opinion, I actually think Toronto played a better game than Winnipeg did.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that.
Look, I know that it's Nick Arbuckle, and Nick Arbuckle's going to do Nick Arbuckle things, which is kind of like the PJ Walker situation, I guess. Like that PJ Walker is going to do PJ Walker things, but Arbuckle only threw one pick in this game, and actually kind of was getting the ball to DeMonte Coxey. He threw for 327 in this game. He had 2 touchdowns. He was getting the ball to their best playmaker. With no disrespect to anybody else on the team, but DeMonte Coxey is. He's definitely their biggest playmaker. It was the special teams that let down Toronto in this game. I mean, we talked a little bit about it before. Trey Lavelle had two special team returns in this game for touchdowns. I know Arbuckle's pick was a pick 6, but even if you left the pick 6 on the board and you had Toronto go where they were, Toronto wins this game if you just eliminate those 2 special teams touchdowns. And that's not taking anything away from Trey Lavelle, and that's not taking anything away from Winnipeg special teams by any means. It's just that I feel like overall Toronto just played a better game offensive and defensively. It's just that third part that everybody always talks about that failed Toronto in this case, and that's been the story of this year. It's always been one of the units, whether it's defensive, offensively, and now in this case, special teams.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% correct in this. I mean, if you look at the statistics, realistically, Toronto did play the better game, but like you said, when you factor in special teams and the points that the Winnipeg special teams unit was able to put up, it was the difference in this game. Sergio Castillo made 4 of 5 field goal attempts, and then on top of that, Trey Lavelle had the 2, or Ball, sorry, had the two return touchdowns. So right there alone, that's literally
12,
26
14,
points
26 points. Yeah.
that you put on the board out of 40. So the majority of the points that Winnipeg scored came on special teams. And granted, I know obviously you'll count field goals as an extension of your offense because the offense has to drive the ball down there. But at the same time, that's a lot of points from your special teams unit to win a game,
Yep.
especially when it's a 71 point output from both teams. So um, like you said, honestly, Arbuckle played really well. His interception was definitely key. Don't get me wrong, but it part of it was the timing of the interception. I think if it had come early in the game, maybe it's not as impactful. You can kind of work around it, so to speak. But at the same time, it came in a clutch moment late at the game, and it really kind of gave Winnipeg the momentum they needed to finish out the game strong. This was another game where uh, Toronto just could not get Arbuckle any help in the run game. Uh, they literally only ran the ball 5 times for 8 yards, which is just unbelievable. But when you look at it on the flip side, Winnipeg had a ground and pound offense. They ran the ball like over 30 times this game. So it's just kind of crazy to see the vastly different approaches. And maybe that's part of the reason why Winnipeg was able to find success. They were keeping their defense fresh, having long extended drives on offense, uh, keeping the ball out of Toronto's hands. And maybe if they had 1, 2 more drives, we're talking about a Toronto victory here. To your credit, like you said, DeMonte Coxey, man, after this game, you have to question if he's not one of the best receivers in the league, let alone, just on Toronto's roster, because he came out of this game with 187 reception yards on 11 targets. He caught 9 of 11 targets and had 2 touchdowns. That includes 57 yards after the catch. So he still had 130 some yards through the air. Just an unbelievable performance by him. And some of those catches were not easy catches. He was high pointing the ball over a defender or snatching it out of their hands, and it was an impressive performance. So I think Toronto's got to be happy with the way this game went. Um, to steal a phrase from Three Down Nation, they recently talked about it, and they said that they don't necessarily feel like Toronto's in a must-win per se. It all depends on how you win these next few games. If you lose a couple games, but it's really close, your offense is putting up points, you probably still go into the next stretch of games when Chad Kelly finally comes back, very optimistic that you have the difference maker that's going to take your offense to that next level and give you that little bit extra that you need to get over the snide in some of these games. So I think Toronto coming out of this game, regardless of the loss, they're probably not as disappointed as they could be in, had this game gone a different direction. So I think they're actually probably encouraged coming out of here. And, maybe they go into next game with a little bit of extra motivation and they collect a couple wins before Kelly comes back here down the stretch. And if they can, they'll keep themselves right in the thick of the playoff hunt. And then, hopefully they can start rolling when Kelly comes back and they'll be right in the thick of things by the end of the year.
Two quick points about both these teams, real quick. The Winnipeg win snapped a 3-game losing streak. Actually, when Winnipeg was actually one of the coldest teams in the league, they were on their way. They had lost twice to Calgary. They lost to Toronto last week. They bounced back to beat Toronto this week, thanks to the special teams. The second point for Toronto in this case is if they are going to win and start turning this around, this has got to be the point. Week 10, they're at home against Ottawa right now. We know about Ottawa's struggles. They looked good against Calgary, but we'll see, what Ottawa team they're going to get. The following week, week 11, they're in Edmonton. Edmonton has been dreadful. They're finding ways to lose games. It's just the way that Edmonton has been all year long. I don't have any faith, even with Cody Fajardo, even though we're going to touch on Edmonton a little bit, even though we kind of hammered them last week. We won't spend too much time on them this week, but we'll talk a little bit about them. And then in week 12, they're at home against BC. So they have 3 games here in a row that are against teams that are currently struggling. Ottawa, Edmonton, BC, probably the bottom 3 teams in the league right now, heading into Labor Day weekend where they get a bye week. Where they play Hamilton. And that's going to be a key key measuring stick for Toronto, I think, in Week 13 is going to be that week against Hamilton. If they can come out of this stretch 2-1 or 3-0, I think that game against Hamilton is going to be the best telltale sign to see where we are for Toronto moving forward, and whether or not they're going to be a potential surprise or bounce back Grey Cup candidate this year, because they have the talent to do it. They have the team to do it. They just need to figure this out, because it has been a very rough start for them. But they are entering a stretch of their schedule where it's very possible they can win the next 3 games heading into Hamilton and be one of the hottest teams in the league. You're muted, Sam. I don't know if you realize that.
I did not. I thought I clicked the mute button. I apologize. So I'm a little curious, looking back, when exactly they placed him on the 6-game injury list, because they list it as July 26, 2025. So the reason I'm throwing that out there is that was literally the day of their Week 8 game. So if he was placed on the list before the game, which is what I would anticipate, you typically have to submit your transactions before the game. Technically, that Winnipeg game was his first game on 6-game injury list. So this past game against Winnipeg was his second. So you mentioned that they've got a game against Ottawa. They've got a game against Edmonton. They've got a game against BC. And then they play Hamilton, which is a really key game. So that's 5 of his 6 games that he will have been on the list. Technically, at that point, you can take him off the list without any salary cap and ramifications.
Hamilton would be his 6th game. So, Hamilton would be the 6th game on the 6-game list. If he has to be a minimum of 6 games, that would be the 6th game for him. I don't expect him back for Hamilton.
You're right. My fault.
Yeah, I don't expect him back for Hamilton, because Week 14 they have a bye week. So that might have been why they also waited to put him on that 6-game list that we missed earlier, because that will put him through that stretch into Hamilton Labor Day weekend, and he comes back in Week 15. They have to hope to win some of these games, but that's almost what I'm wondering now, because I just looked ahead in Week 14 they have a bye week.
That could make sense. I could see it happening either way. I could see them losing a couple games and then trying to bring him back for Hamilton.
Yeah.
And knowing that he had a weaker rest after that. But then you're probably right. They probably anticipate him coming back after the bye week because of the timing of everything, and that would be his full 6 game. So that could completely explain why they did things the way they did. I would have to look back. I don't recall the rules about a player staying on 6-game injury list after their first initial 6-game stint. Maybe it becomes season-ending IR at this point. So I'd have to look back at the rules. I don't recall exactly how that works, and that could be the entire reason why they did not place him on 6-game injured list to begin with. So that is something that we did not really talk about before. So that could be the whole reason why that happened the way it did.
Yeah, I feel like that maybe they looked at their schedule. They realized some of these guys were struggling they were doing the 1-game list, and they were kind of like, we'll see how the league looks like at this point. And then when they realized that where they were compared to some of their teams, they looked ahead to their schedule, and maybe that's what made them decide to do Week 8. And they were like, oh, well, we can do that this way. Hamilton would technically be the 6th game, so he could come back possibly. But even if he doesn't, Week 14 is a bye week. So, he's going to get all that rest regardless. If we play him, he's going to get rest afterwards. If we don't play him, he has an extra week to get back to full health. So that's the only thing I can really think of at this point why you would put him on at Week 8. So, but that kind of makes a little more sense for Toronto, and actually kind of gives them a little bit of light at the tunnel, especially if they can come out of these next 3 games. I'll say the next 4. If they can come out of these next 4 games 3-1, maybe even 4-0, I think that they're going to be in a lot better shape, and this might be the Toronto team that we were expecting at the beginning of the year.
Could be for sure. If you're watching right now, let us know how many games you think Toronto will win over the next 4. Again, they've got
Ottawa,
Ottawa,
Edmonton,
Edmonton,
BC,
BC, and Hamilton. So that could definitely be a 2-2 stretch or a 3-1 stretch, and if they can come out of that 3-1, all of a sudden they're right back in the thick of things, and they will not have any issues competing for the playoffs when Kelly comes back.
I think 3-1 is the target. I think 2-2 would be acceptable.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you come out of these next 4 with a 2-2 record, you're probably thrilled because that puts you at what 4-7, I think.
Yeah, 4-7.
And then you have the rest of the season. So, man, you would have another 7 games to turn things around. You could still realistically end like 11 with an 11-win season. So, that could be a really, really advantageous situation for them if that happens. 2-2 or 3-1. If they went 3-1, Chad Kelly is going to be a really happy camper when he comes back.
He will be for sure.
But moving on to Edmonton, it seems like they have kind of looked a little bit better since they've made the change at quarterback. Cody Fajardo is definitely playing pretty well. There have been some moments where he's kind of left some plays out on the field, which, I mean, that happens in every game for every quarterback. Nobody's perfect. But, you have to wonder if Edmonton hasn't made the right decision at this point. He went 20 for 25 in this game, 257 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He also added a carry for 13 yards. We talked about it a little bit last week. Do you think they made the right decision pulling Trey Ford at this point?
Well, I mean, I think that they have no choice but to believe that they did. I mean, you take a look at the last 2 weeks, they played the top 2 teams in the league, and they lost by a total of 7 points. They lost to Saskatchewan by 3. They lost to Hamilton by 4. And both those games, Edmonton was in control at one point. They were winning at one point. So it's not like that this isn't an Edmonton situation where they were, only winning in the first quarter by like 3. They were leading late in both those games. So I think that they've made the right decision. My problem with Edmonton overall is just like with everything else that we discussed with them is I think the overall makeup of the team is just not strong enough. I think this team's problems are bigger than one player, whether it's Trey Ford or Cody Fajardo. I think Fajardo seems to have a better grasp on the offense. Like, no offense to Trey by any means, it feels like he has a better understanding of where to go with the ball and make quicker decisions. Maybe not necessarily always make better decisions, but he seems to understand this offense a little bit better than what Trey was showing it earlier in the year. And that might just be a veteran thing, right, for Cody, because he's been around long enough and has had a ton of starts. And what is he, 9th all time now on the passing leader list? So, I don't want to hammer too hard on Edmonton because I've been pretty harsh on them the last 3 or 4 years, but I don't know if they're necessarily right there or not. That's the most difficult and baffling thing about this team. This is why this team is so frustrating, is because they go out and take on the top 2 teams, lose by a combined 7 points, but then next week they'll go out against they'll go against Montreal, so they have another tougher team. Without Davis Alexander, it's a pretty tough team, but they'll go out against Montreal next week and lose 51-6. So it's like, it's hard with this team to fully understand the grasp of the magnitude that they have for this roster. I feel like it's a talented roster. On paper, it looks like a talented roster. The coaching staff seems to have a better relationship with the players. We haven't really heard reports of that, like we heard with Chris Jones, like for 3 years over there. So I don't know. Maybe it's the right decision. It feels like it's the right decision so far. I know it hasn't resulted in a W, but when you take on the top 2 teams currently in the league and you only lose by 7 points, they're doing something right enough to be able to at least be in the conversation at the end of these games.
Fair point. And there is something to be said about, that veteran presence that Cody Fajardo brings. I had a brief conversation with Brandon Banks on Twitter. We were kind of going back and forth about Trey Ford and if he should still be the starter. And he said no. And part of his reasoning was the fact that the wide receivers on the team wanted Fajardo to start. He would know a hell of a lot better than either of us would on what those players on that roster want and need. And I think it makes a lot of sense that you want that veteran presence to start if you're a wide receiver. You obviously want the ball delivered in the right spot. You want a quarterback that's going to come in and do everything that you would expect to be done in the manner that the offense is supposed to be run by. And we don't know if Trey Ford is improvising a lot of the time. We don't know if he's just, getting by on athleticism or what it may be. So I could definitely see a situation where, some of these wide receivers are playing a little bit harder when Fajardo's in the game because they know that they're going to get better opportunities to find success themselves. So, that is kind of a factor that I think a lot of us have kind of slept on. If you're if you're a wide receiver, if you're a running back, if you're an offensive lineman, and you have a quarterback in there that's just not doing all the things that he needs to do, are you really giving your 100% effort? You're a professional football player. You should be, but this is not a perfect world. So there's probably some scenarios where guys are just kind of getting in their feelings a little bit when a bad play happens and stuff like that. So are they really putting forth all of the effort that they could to really kind of do what they need to do for Trey Ford? But another factor in all this as well is that Fajardo's played for Milanovic in the past, so he came into this offense, very versed in what Milanovic wants to do. I mean, he was there for 2 years in Toronto with him early on in his career. So, I mean, yeah, things have changed a little bit, but, that was probably some very foundational moments in his CFL career. And a lot of what he learned was probably from Milanovic to begin with. So I think it's a situation where he was very well prepared to step into this starting role and find some success. And maybe it didn't show in his first game, but I think it's going to be potentially a steadying force for Edmonton going forward. Even though I still think they may have made a mistake benching Trey Ford for his overall long-term outlook, in the short term, Fajardo's the right answer.
Yeah, and that might be the case. That might be the situation where it was a mistake for a long-term aspect of things. But I mean, Edmonton needed to do something. I think anybody, will. I think anybody will attest to that. Like that, they will definitely have to. I think anybody inside the organization or fan base would have to attest to the fact that something needed to change, right? Whether it was the quarterback position or another change somewhere else. And you can't really do the head coach again because the head coach just is new and just took over for somebody else. So that doesn't seem like a logical route. So in the world of football, it's always the quarterback that seems to be the next piece. And while the results haven't officially gone their way, it feels like that they're at least taking strides in the right direction. And maybe that's only a short-term thing, like you said with Fajardo, but it seems to be at least working a little bit for Edmonton at this point in time, where they're actually being able to be in games with a chance to win at the end, which is all you really want, which is really all that you ask for as a football team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then to go back to discussing the overall passing yards that we were just mentioning, Trevor Harris moved up the rankings. He now sits 14th all time, just past Dieter Brock on the list with 35,331 yards. And I believe it was, let me get back to the list real quick. I believe it was Bo Levi Mitchell that moved up to 9th. He started
Bo Levi, that's right, yeah.
He started the season with 39,023 passing yards and recently has been putting up a ton of yardage and has climbed the charts quite dramatically. Give me just a sec. Let me pull up his total yardage that he's at now. 41,574 yards, which puts him in 9th place. He's just past what Doug Flutie did with 41,355 yards. So just past Doug Flutie. He's closing in on Matt Dunnigan. Although he's got a couple thousand yards to go, he should pass him by the end of the season. And then it will really be a question on if Bo Levi wants to continue playing, because Ron Lancaster would be the next one to pass, and he's got 50,000 yards. So quite a big gap there going forward. So awesome news for Bo Levi Mitchell. He deserves to be climbing up those rankings, as does Trevor Harris. So it's awesome to see them get to that point. But there's quite the gap there. So we'll see if he can climb the charts too much more over the rest of his career.
Yeah, for sure, without a doubt. So good luck to Bo Levi. Hopefully, if he does continue to play, that's what happens.
Absolutely. Our final topic, it seems like we're kind of moving pretty quick here. Maybe that's just me. But our final topic,
an hour, just under an hour. So
that's true. So maybe I'm just imagining things. But the blowout in Montreal, Saskatchewan walked into Montreal, took a lead and never looked back, primarily because of a punishing run game, which we've talked about a lot today. That run game really helps your quarterback get into a rhythm. And if you let Trevor Harris get into a rhythm, chances are, if you're the opposing team, you're going to be finding a loss somewhere in there.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I mean, it's just insane to watch Montreal without Davis Alexander kind of fall from this potential. And it's weird because we talk about how one guy doesn't make a change, but for some reason it feels like not having Davis Alexander is like a huge change to this Montreal team. But it wasn't pretty. It wasn't close. Saskatchewan solidified themselves even further as a Grey Cup, contender, which, I mentioned at the beginning in the preseason, power rankings, that this was my dark horse pick for the Grey Cup. And they're living up to it. This team has solidified itself, in my opinion, and just going in and beating the hell out of Montreal just kind of, makes that even more solidified for me. So
you're not wrong at all. And honestly, I think a big part of what the issues are, and I don't have the data in front of me right this second to back this claim up, but I believe it's the mobility that Davis Alexander brings to the table. McLeod Bethel Thompson is a very similar passer. He's definitely always been pretty efficient in the passing game. He will throw some interceptions without a doubt, but at the same time, he's not a mobile guy. He's not going to get outside the pocket. He's not going to, shake a defender by any stretch. And to Davis Alexander's credit, he is a very efficient runner. He's not a guy who's going to, put up 100 yards in a game or anything like that. But when he takes off to run, he typically is going to be able to convert a first down or get the yardage he needs. I mean, he literally has only run the ball 9 times this season, but averages almost 10 yards per carry. And that was in 4 games. So, I mean, that's a pretty significant output that early in the season. He had 87 yards and a touchdown through 4 games. So I think that's a big part of what is kind of ailing Montreal right now. And if you look back and in this game, McLeod had pressure in his face quite a bit, which kind of threw him off his game. He only completed 15 passes out of 26 attempts. We saw Caleb Evans for a brief stretch. He only completed 1 of 3 attempts. So neither of these quarterbacks were very efficient on the day. But ultimately, I think, part of that, at least when it's McLeod in the game, is the lack of mobility. And, we saw that kind of come to fruition with a couple sacks in this game. So it's going to be interesting watching, going forward. Davis Alexander's missed quite a few games at this point. He is nearing the point of returning. And I think we do see Montreal kind of catch some momentum once he comes back. But like you said, it's kind of bizarre to think that, only a couple seasons ago, McLeod Bethel Thompson was leading the CFL in passing yards. And now, in his time with Montreal, he just hasn't really been able to put it together. It was just last week that we were talking about the criticisms he had gotten from TSN and how he said, don't say anything nice about me. Well, I guess this week he doesn't have to talk like that because there really isn't anything nice to say about him. So when it comes to that, I mean, you have to be concerned if you're Montreal. What do you do there? I mean, do you turn to Caleb Evans going forward?
Yeah.
Do you just ride it out with MBT? I mean, what would you do if you were Montreal?
Just have to ride out with MBT, I think. I don't think Caleb Evans provides the same leadership toughness and ability that MBT does. It's just MBT's age, I think, is a big part of this. Like, I don't think he's necessarily, I don't think his talent necessarily is gone, away or anything. It's just his athleticism isn't as important, isn't as big. So, some arm strength kind of falls apart a little bit, and mobility, obviously, we know. But overall, I don't think I would turn to Caleb Evans. I think I would just continue to roll out MBT and hope for the best. They need to weather the storm. It's similar to what Toronto has been doing all year with Arbuckle, is they just need to weather the storm.
Yeah, and the one difference when you look at those two teams is Montreal has a cushion.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you talk about it like that, they're Montreal can afford to lose some games. Do they want to? Absolutely not. But that's why you bring in a guy like MBT in the first place. You think he's a quality backup, but they're 5-3,
Yeah.
and that's after losing this game. So I mean, even if he drops another one, they're still in the second place in the East. Toronto's nowhere near catching up. Ottawa's nowhere near catching up. You're ahead of BC. As far as the playoff picture, you're technically ahead of Winnipeg. So realistically, you're sitting in a great spot. I mean, there's really no reason to panic. But I actually think that if it were me, I might actually mix in Caleb Evans more, just because of his mobility aspect. He's a tough guy. He's not, the leader that MBT is, like you just alluded to. But at the same time, I think you got to do something a little bit different. But regardless, like we just mentioned, they've got the cushion to work with. So I mean, if they want to ride it out with MBT, I don't think anybody really can judge them for that. You brought him in for this purpose. You might as well let him finish it out, and then see where you land. If he picks up another victory or two, we're probably not even having this conversation in the next couple weeks.
Correct.
That's basically all the topics
That's
that
it.
we had written down. Is there anything else that we didn't cover you wanted to talk about real quick before we get out of here?
Not really. Pretty quiet week across the board for most of it. I mean, some pretty good games, and then there was some not so good games. But overall, I think the meat in between the two sandwiches this week were pretty good, and then obviously the bread was pretty stale. So
that is accurate. That's a good analogy. I like it. Before we get out of here, we obviously want to do predictions, but how's everything going in the year-long football? Pick 'em.
Let's see. I lost last week in a weird turn of events. It was very strange. I'm not sure how I lost last week, but either way, I'm in the playoffs. I'm winning my division. I'm 6-2 as of last week, and I believe. Let me see scorecard. And I believe I won this week because I think the guy I played picked Toronto, and I was the only one that picked Winnipeg. So, yeah, it looks like I should win this week as well. So, I'll be 7-2, still have the best record in the league, and I'm averaging the highest point total of the year too. So
very nice. You've had quite the season in the pick'ems. Didn't you won the LFA, right?
I won the LFA one. I am already the highest record in the playoffs in the ELF one too. I'm 8-1 over there.
And then you had success in the indoor football, right? You were
I made it to the conference championship game. Chris was on the other side. I was hoping to see Chris in the finals, but I lost. So
it's all good. It's it's crazy to find, see you having this much success. Pick'ems, they can go either way. You always have upsets and stuff every week, so you're definitely killing it so far this season. But I prefaced our picks with that for a reason. If you are an avid CFL bettor, we have had some pretty good success picking games this season. I'm not going to say that we're perfect by any stretch, but I would definitely recommend that if you're putting in some money on DraftKings and throwing down on some parlays or anything like that, Michael's probably the guy to listen to when it comes to betting advice. So we're going to go ahead and pull up the betting lines. Give me just a moment. And
Failed my 4-leg parlay this week because of Calgary, but
oh damn!
Game 1, my 4-leg parlay was out, but I won my 3-leg parlay. So that's the good thing about losing your parlay on the first leg is you can always go back and put in for your other ones. So
that is true. That is true. But then sounds like you kind of bet with your heart this week a little bit.
Well, no, I picked Calgary just because I wasn't sure what Ottawa was going to bring. I didn't expect PJ Walker to have a disaster of a game either. So, but I picked that game as a money line game. I didn't bother with the spread because I didn't trust that Calgary was going to win. I think it was like a 5.5 point spread, and I just didn't trust that. So, and I wasn't quite sure to put Ottawa there either. Like it was like one of those things where they could have. In my mind, Ottawa could have lost by 2, but could have also lost by 9, and I would have missed on both ends. So I didn't want to. I didn't want to risk it. So
I'm not particularly sure. I mean, I'm not an avid bettor, so please take that with a grain of salt. I do the pick'ems and stuff like that. I obviously follow the games, but I do not bet on these games typically. Do you have any reason why they would only have the Saturday games listed? It seems kind of weird.
No, it's odd. I'm not really sure why.
I mean, because we have a Thursday night and a Friday night game this week, so
it may be the fact that they just haven't set the lines yet because it's Sunday, so they might not set up. They might not set them until Monday, so.
That's very possible. But anyway, here are the betting lines for the Saturday games. You got Ottawa at Toronto and Winnipeg at Calgary. Both interesting games, to say the least. What do you think about these point spreads? I'm kind of surprised to see Calgary a 6-point favorite over Winnipeg.
Well, I think that's primarily because of the fact that Vernon Adams should be back. And I think that's pretty much what bettors are probably expecting. This line will also move. I don't expect it to stay at -6. I would imagine it's probably going to move to, by the time that the day of Saturday comes, that game will probably be like a 4.5 or 3.5 point spread, I would imagine. Because it moves throughout the week depending on, betting and all that stuff. So, for Toronto and Ottawa, that makes sense to me. Honestly, I'm not sure if I'm taking the spread in that game. I'd probably bet the under. I know Toronto's a pretty high-scoring team, but I just don't know if Ottawa has enough to keep up for it. So if I was going to make the bet there, it would be Ottawa. I mean, it would be the under in that game instead of the money line. But if you were going to go money line, I'd say Toronto.
That's fair. That's fair for sure. I think that spread makes a lot of sense for Ottawa and Toronto, especially after the games that they just played.
Yeah.
And actually, I said the 6-point spread seemed like a lot for Calgary, but looking back, they beat Winnipeg by 21 points last time, and by I think it was
14. I think the week
14,
before.
Yeah, exactly. So they've
beaten them by 35 this week. They played them twice already and beaten them by 35 combined. So
exactly. So maybe this is actually a little bit of a paltry spread. Like maybe it could be even further apart, and it would still make some sense. So that might actually be a good place to put your money down this upcoming week, especially if Vernon Adams is healthy. But like we said before, he had already passed through the concussion protocol before this past game, so there is very little doubt that he's going to play this next week. So that's definitely important information to know if you're going to bet on that game for sure. But to switch over to the schedule so we can see all of the games. Here we go. We've got the 4 games for this weekend. Kicks off on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. BC at Hamilton. Who do you have in that game?
I'm taking Hamilton. I think the hottest team in the league right now. I think that they got the best overall. Between the two teams, they have the best overall roster at this point, and I just don't see BC necessarily rebounding yet. So I'm taking Hamilton.
All right, I'm going to agree with you on that one. It's kind of crazy to say that Nathan Rourke's back in the CFL and really just hasn't made a difference for BC as of yet. But Hamilton's rolling. They've got the momentum on their side. BC are very much the opposite, so I'm going to pick Hamilton in this game as well. What about the Edmonton and Montreal game in Montreal?
Taking Montreal, but this could be a win for Edmonton if Fajardo plays the way that he played last week. But I'm taking Montreal just because I think they have a better team, especially defensively.
That's fair. I was also going to take Montreal on this one as well. Edmonton, there's just something about them. They cannot figure out how to win games a lot of the time. So I have a hard time having any sort of faith in them, especially over a quality team like Montreal. MBT is not a terrible quarterback by any stretch, but I will say that this is an interesting game, storyline wise, because you look at it and they had this offseason trade to swap Fajardo and MBT, and here we are in week 10, and it's Fajardo starting for Edmonton and MBT starting for Montreal. So interesting how that all has transpired so far. But yeah, I'm definitely picking Montreal in this game. Very little doubt in my mind that they come away with the victory in this one. Ottawa at Toronto, and this is the game that I think we're going to split on.
Very well, possibly. I mean, I'm taking Toronto. I don't know what it is with Ottawa, and maybe the win last week will be the turnaround point for them. But until they kind of string together a couple of wins or start playing a little bit better overall, I have a tough time picking them right now. So I know it's Arbuckle with Toronto, but they've played well when it matters, and I think they outplayed Winnipeg last week, even though they lost. So I'm going to go with Toronto in this one.
Don't fault you at all for that pick, especially with them at home. Like you just said, Toronto played a hell of a game last week against a tougher opponent. And well, I guess I can't really say that Winnipeg's a tougher opponent, but they played a better game than Ottawa did in their game. So I definitely understand why you would pick them. I, on the other side, am going to pick Ottawa in this game. I think, one, they've got the momentum coming out of that victory over Calgary, which I actually think is a better team than Winnipeg or Toronto. So that was a big-time win, and obviously it was because of P.J. Walker. Don't get me wrong. If Vernon Adams is in that game, they probably win it. But at the same time, I think Ottawa really needed that for morale purposes. And more importantly, they're in a situation right now where every game counts. We could literally lose against Toronto this week, and they could be looking for a new head coach by next week. It's literally to that point in Ottawa right now. So I think there's a lot of fire underneath the team right now, and I think they're going to ride that at least for a couple weeks. I don't see them, going on a run by any stretch. I expect them to probably maybe string together 2 or 3 wins and then find another loss somewhere in there. But I think in this particular game, I'm picking Ottawa. So I could end up being wrong. Would not shock me in the slightest. But as of right now, I'm going to roll with Ottawa due to the desperation factor. They need this game more than Toronto does.
Yeah, that's fair.
Last game of the weekend, picking close to your heart, a Winnipeg at Calgary, which we just discussed a little bit due to the betting odds. This is could end up a lopsided game.
Yeah, I'm taking Calgary though. I just think they're the better of the teams at this point, better of the team right now at this point in time, and I think that's just going to be with Vernon Adams coming back. They seem to have Winnipeg's number. They've been pretty dominant over them all season. It's hard to beat a team 3 times, but I think in this case, Calgary's going to do it. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I'm picking Calgary in this one as well. You look back at the last couple games, they've pretty thoroughly dominated Calgary. So Winnipeg. So it definitely would not surprise me in the slightest if we see the exact same situation unfold in this one. It's going to be interesting to see how this game goes. Does Winnipeg come in with any sort of momentum due to the fact that they just won a game and finally kind of found a way to win with Strevler starting? Does Claros come back? Does that change anything? So there are some questions there, but ultimately Calgary is, in my opinion, one of the best teams in the league at this point. I was on the bandwagon before the season, and I think even I underestimated what they would be able to do this year. But that offense is built to win, and I think it's built to win more importantly in the depths of the season. So we're seeing them win a bunch of games early. I think they're only going to get better down the stretch, is what I'm trying to say. A lot of young players on that offense that are still developing as they're playing. So, I think this is a win for Calgary, and I think this is going to be, them continuing their run to the playoffs, because I don't see them slowing down anytime soon.
Yep.
So that basically concludes all of our subjects for the day. If I can figure out how to get us back on screen, I will do so. And there we go. Still new to this producer thing, and it's only been 5 years. But anyway, yeah, great show. I mean, like I said, there wasn't a ton to talk about today, but plenty enough to fill an hour of your guys' time. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure you do us a solid and hit the like button. That is hugely impactful to our growth, which we are growing exponentially right now. Thanks to our guy Curtis, who has been producing some very funny shorts on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked those out, I highly recommend to go check those out. And then also check out the rest of our long form content. We've got everything covered from wrestling to NFL football to indoor football to basically everything in between. So, we've got you covered. If you like sports, stick with us. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel. We are aiming to try and have 2,500 subscribers by the end of August. I think we can do it with your help. So if you're watching on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitch, do us a solid. Head over to the Shady Sports Network YouTube channel and subscribe there. Also, head over and subscribe to Shady Sports Network or Shady Sports Live Events, which is also on YouTube. That is our secondary channel we launched earlier this season to kind of be a catch-all for all of our live events that we go to, whether it's sports, whether it's actual games or it's announcements or anything of the sort. And then also, as always, check out our merch store, brandingblanks.com. There's a Shady Sports Network section. We've got t-shirts, hoodies, beanies, baseball hats, and then we also got some fantasy reports merchandise out now as well. So I think that basically covers all of my spiel to close this out. Is there anything you wanted to shout out or anything you want to get off your chest before we get out of here?
Not at all, man. Just to enjoy the CFL action. We're gearing up. The NFL's on its way, and that sometimes can get kind of washed underneath the NFL, but make sure you continue to support and check out the CFL. It's worth it. They have great games and it's great football. So don't put it on the back burner.
Absolutely. Completely agree. And actually, I think, since we still have the preseason and, really, let's be honest, there's 17 regular season games in the NFL. The first few games don't even matter. Just finish watching the CFL season, tune into the NFL after that. And yeah, definitely would recommend catching the rest of the games. It's going to be a great season. But with all that being said, we really appreciate you guys tuning in this morning. We really appreciate you guys tuning in every weekend. So make sure you're tuning in every Sunday, 8 a.m. Eastern, and we will be back to catch you guys next weekend. New little outro to tell you a little bit about our show tomorrow evening. So definitely tune back in tomorrow evening for Monarchs of Wrestling, and stay tuned for the little bit of a promo we got here.
Cool McCain.
You thought you wanted Gunther against Chad Gable, but you didn't. And I'm going to tell you why. Chad Gable would take everything that Gunther's done and bury it.
The Playmaker.
It was on site. AJ Styles walked out there, seen LA like, oh, okay, then LA Knight hopped out the car, let's go.
Break down everything in TNA, AEW, and all of the WWE programming. Join these two kings, Monarchs of Wrestling, live every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Central on the Play Caller Sports Talk YouTube channel.